This is the Language of Humanity podcast, episode number 1, a podcast where, together with artists and creative thinkers, we try to answer a question whether art is the primordial language of humanity. The following is a conversation with Sonum Batra, London-based, brilliant music director, composer, passionate pianist and traveler. So, first of all, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a really long time, and I hope to cover as much stuff, actually more like explore as much stuff as possible today. And I've been looking forward to it, as I believe your very well-formed views and tools and thinking frameworks within art and creative industry might not only be really super interesting for a lot of people, but also really helpful in pinpointing what their place within it actually is. And what I mean by this place is to see whether different forms of interaction with art, less or more methodological forms of research, like for example this podcast, or other forms of creative knowledge production, could be considered also as a form of art in itself, and through this explore the premise of my podcast. Let me just briefly introduce you, and then you'll be able to fix some of the errors I presented. So right off the bat, you're so young and already been able to work on such a variety of projects, which is super impressive to me. You directed countless musicals, plays, and composed and directed what you composed, which is also really nice to have, and been really helpful to so many people learn music and like deepen their interest. You know, the pyjama, for example, thing. So what's your secret in maintaining this, getting so much out of it, out of your passion? And also you love to travel, so that's also a really important point about you. Maybe that also plays a role in having that open headspace, so to speak. So what's your secret? And if you want, you can correct anything.
Okay, so the secret to getting so many things done, I'd like to think of myself as quite an efficient person. You can only keep up with a really crazy schedule if you are quite disciplined with your time management. And I think that's something I've had to be good at in order to keep up doing all of the different jobs. So yeah, I definitely think efficiency is the way forward with that. Working on lots of various different projects, I think I was quite lucky to get some of the ones that I got. Sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think I just happened to meet some really influential people along the way who were quite supportive of me. And also, I'm quite calm in the rehearsal room. I don't stress out about things. I don't have divas drops or tantrums or anything like that. I've got a principle of just get your head down and get your work done. So I'm quite easy to get on with in the rehearsal room. And I think I've developed a nice relationship with a few directors, and they're the ones who call me back to work with them time and time again. So I think that's probably been my biggest strength, is I'm quite a calm person, and I organise my time very well. So I think they're the two things.
That's amazing. Do you think that's a trait of your personality, or you also developed it along the way, transitioning from your university to work?
I think it's a bit of both. I've always been the kind of person who will never do just one thing. Like, I have to be doing several things. I think I just get bored really quickly. So for the course this year, obviously I'm not just doing the MA, I'm also working full time. But I think I'm one of those people, I really thrive on being busy. So I think that was already part of my personality anyway.
Yeah, I think that ability to thrive on being busy must be greatly helpful, especially for artists who, alongside developing their careers, must develop interpersonally. Let's now move on to the second part, the likes. I hope this recurring section will allow the audience to expand their interests, and it will allow me also to look into how someone's practice reflects in someone's tastes. And in regards to your likes, I divided them into kind of 3 categories, music separately, and then the usage of the music, like theater, film music, and maybe two. Okay, but just developed two. Okay, so first of all, music. Obviously your background is the classical music, and you started at King's College London working with the Royal Academy of Arts. Isn't that true?
I didn't work with the Royal Academy of Arts.
I found on one website that you were not collaborating, but working with tutors from it.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I chose to go to King's for university was I wasn't sure if I wanted to do music as an academic subject or whether I wanted to do music as performance. I wasn't quite sure. When I was younger, I actually thought I wanted to be a musicologist, which didn't happen, and it never will happen. But at the time,
what exactly a musicologist is?
It's studying music and like the history of music and being a music academic, basically. And so one of the things that drew me to King's was you could do your practical element of the course with tutors at the Royal Academy of Music. So that's why I decided to go to King's. And actually, not many people know this. I didn't do piano at King's. I actually trained as a singer. I loved doing opera, and I did that first. And it was only towards the end where I realised I still carried on with the piano, but my study at King's was actually singing. But whatever I did, I was always drawn back to the piano, always. And I was really into musical theatre, and at the time there weren't many female music directors, so it was a big thing to have female MDs coming into the scene, and I fell into music directing by absolute accident. I was on a project as an actor, must have been 19. I was with the Youth Music Theatre. It was a devised project over 10 days, and their composer got sick and left after 2. And the director said, "Oh, Sonum, you play the piano. Do you compose?" And I said, "Oh, well, a little bit." She said, "Do you want to write the show?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And that's how it kind of took off. And I felt like that director at the time, she's called Kath Burlinson, I feel like she really ignited a love in me of playing the piano as a music director and as for composing shows. So it just kind of all stemmed from there, really. And then she put me in touch with another director, and that's how it all developed. But I did, not many people know this, I did go to King's as a singer.
I thought that was completely opposite. I thought it was piano first and then singing, which came from the involvement with theatre and musicals and everything. But it was the opposite. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I always loved the piano, always. But I think I loved them both. I think doing the singing thing made me realise I did like singing, but it made me realise I didn't love it as much as the piano.
So that's a nice tangent. I just wanted to say that you like Debussy, Chopin, and Janicek, which, by the way, these are the ones I've chosen from our conversation that's the most recurring in your plays, and Pyjama Party, the ones that I've listened to you playing. And the Janicek one is that I'm really super grateful for you to introducing me to. And yeah, once again, amazing initiative. And
it gives us all something to do, doesn't it?
It definitely does. I'm already looking forward to the next one. And from theater and music, if you can confirm, Stephen Sondheim and Stephen Schwartz. Do you like them?
I mean, I love them both. I really love Stephen Sondheim. I've always been a fan of his stuff. And Stephen Schwartz, I really like his music as well. I teach a lot of their stuff too, so a lot of my students go through and sing them. But I love all musicals. I think they're great fun, and I really, really enjoy them.
Favorite one, Sweeney Todd and Into the Woods?
Yes, gosh, you've done some good research. Yes, I love Sweeney Todd. I actually wrote my dissertation on Sweeney Todd when I was an undergrad. I just think it's brilliant. I think it's kind of this hybrid between opera and musical theatre. And I also think, and I said this in my dissertation, I said in a lot of ways it's like a film score. And what happened a few years later? the movie of Sweeney Todd came out, they got that idea from my dissertation. I'm
I
joking.
love that movie. It's really nice.
But it works really well. I think Stephen Sondheim, and because he's a lyricist as well, I just think he gets it spot on right every time. He's got a great way of portraying feelings of songs and meanings in so many unique ways, and I aspire to write like him.
Amazing. I think I missed one thing from the introduction I wanted to add, that you actually going back into the composing part of your career passion, and that's also what you're trying to develop alongside like all of the other projects.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's playing on shows is great. You can do a lot of stuff, and it's great fun working with actors, and it's been lovely working with bands and conducting them and teaching harmonies and stuff. But there's something really for me that's more, I think it's because it's more creative for me, is when you're making your own music and it's your own self-expression. And I really enjoy having that freedom to add my Sonum stamp, if you will, onto music. So often I work with composers, sometimes I'll be their arranger, so I'll arrange the band parts for them, or I'll arrange vocal harmonies, and I enjoy that because I get to add something that I would like to add to it. Whereas when I'm just solidly music directing, I'm given all the music and that's the way it goes, and there's no changing it, there's no altering it. So yeah, composition I really enjoy, and I really love film music, and I've never really given writing film music a good shot. I've never had the time to do it. So I'd actually quite like to use the fact that I'm studying now with the possibility of doing an arts-based dissertation. I'd really like to use that opportunity to explore and write some music for a short film, because I'd love to give it a try. I love film music. I think it's really expressive, and I love writing for orchestras. So
You definitely
I guess
should.
now's a good time to try.
I can't wait to hear and see how it works all together.
We shall see.
Okay, let me just go straight to the main questions. So, what made you initially interested in music? And before you answer, let me just add something to it. I remember one story that you told me about. I'm not sure whether that was in your kindergarten or somewhere around this age. Your passion for Chopin and playing the one of the hardest pieces for the piano, the Fantasia Impromptu, and you were so determined to it. Do you think that was somewhere around the time you decided you want to like play piano for forever?
I was so young when I started. I don't remember starting to learn. My sister had lessons, and I think because my sister did it, I sort of did as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so little. It was my mum that reminded me of that fantasy impromptu story, because my piano teacher had obviously told her. But yeah, I was so little. I don't remember learning. I don't remember my first lessons. I don't remember working through my first books at all.
That's
so like
interesting.
which has actually been really interesting as a piano teacher. A lot of my friends say, oh yeah, I use this book because that's the book I started with. And I sort of think back, I can't remember. My earliest memories of playing the piano was actually just before I took my first exam. I remember learning my exam pieces, but I don't remember being taught how to read music because I was so little. My earliest memories are actually being able to play. So I wouldn't be able to tell you how I got started or why, because I must have been about 3 maybe.
That is amazing, because this podcast is about linguistic approach to what art is, and when I think about it, that you actually don't remember learning music is exactly like learning language. We don't really remember learning language, and you just grew up with the music alongside, and that just became a part of your life and you as a person.
Definitely. I think if you start something young enough, or if you start things really when you're really young, of course you won't remember. So it's, for me, music, English, and Hindi are three things that I can do. Like, well, I speak English and Hindi, and I play piano and read music, and they're three things that I don't remember learning how to do.
That's mind
I
blowing.
obviously did.
Yeah.
Like, so my teacher obviously taught me how to read music, but my earliest memories of piano playing is when I could actually read music.
Amazing. That's a really nice link between different artists, whether they grew with or it grew on them while doing some other things.
Definitely. I think with a lot of pianists, though, I think you'll find most of them start when they're about 6 or 7. I think I started when I was 3.5, which is probably why I don't remember. Like, I don't remember my first 2 years of piano lessons. So,
okay, let's jump to another question. The second question from the explorative section. Do you think that different forms of art, and bear with me, I will explain what I mean by this question.
okay.
Do you think that different forms of art share similarities in the way they impact people? If yes, would there be any underlying principles defining those impacts? And I'm not entirely sure what even those principles would be, so you can approach this question from any angle and however you want. And I vaguely claim that for the sake of making it simple, and the name actually of the podcast, The Language of Humanity, that they have some sort of linguistic basis. And the reason for it is that art is often being described as another form of communication, and that we develop alongside our culture, while developing our culture. And it nicely ties to the previous question when we talked about that you sometimes get bored if exposed to prolonged monotonous work, and you just want to be the initial creative fuel for something.
Okay, that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure if I know enough about other art forms and what people think about them to be able to answer that.
Yeah, you can do it within your art, because there's
within music.
Yeah.
I think jobs I love in music and jobs I dislike are very personal to me. And I know a lot of people who really love MDing shows and having the music there and ready to go, and that they really enjoy that. And I think different parts of music fuel different people's passions. And I can only really speak for me personally. I like the initial phases. I really love the initial phases. I really roughly put together a show with the director, not last year, the year before, and it was called Relativity, and it was all about Einstein's wife, and that was actually meant to open again this year. But this time we hired an arranger. Now that's the job that I like sometimes with other people's work, but because I'd done all the original writing the melodies, putting the songs down with the director, I wanted it to go to somebody else who had that fresh perspective on it. And I think whatever you do, if it's something you've been doing, for me, if it's something I've been doing for so long and it just feels like a job, I don't think I'm producing my best work. So when it came to, because arranging I love doing for other people, but when it was my show and it was my songs, I wanted somebody else's input. I wanted someone to come in with that creative fuel, as you've said, which is a great phrase, by the way. I wanted someone to come in and have that and approach it with a fresh pair of eyes to get the best result. So going back to your question, it's a really hard one to answer, but I think it's very much down to, for me personally, I think the answer lies within how passionate and excited you are about a particular part of the project. And that could be really different for each person or dependent on each project. Like the times I have been asked to arrange a show and I'm like, yeah, I would love to do that because I've come in, I've heard it, and I've got these ideas and I get to put them into practice. But then if it's my own stuff, I lose that after a while because I've worked on it for so long. I can't hear past a few sounds in my head. So I think doing things collaboratively and playing to different people's strengths and passions and time frames that they have got. Like if they've not been working on something long and they've come in with all these great ideas, I think that's worth exploring. Some people really dislike that. I love that hectic kind of trying to get something down and rewriting it and reworking it and changing it with a director and making it work. Some people find that really stressful and would rather come into the project when all the music is written down, it's all scored up beautifully, and they get to teach the actors and they get to conduct the band and they get to play live in the shows every night. That's somebody else's passion, and that's, I think, for specific projects you can enjoy all the elements, but I don't think you can do all of them on one project.
Well put. Well put. Maybe it has a little bit also to do with how you were introduced to your practice and your type of work you were doing previously. Just like thrown into it.
Maybe. I think there's so much to think about in terms of music for productions that I think if you were to do it all by yourself, do everything, be in charge of every element from composing to arranging to vocal arrangements to MD, it's too much and it becomes too exhausting. And I personally, I mean, I did my first essay at King's on this topic about theatre being collaborative and how creativity is all about the process. And I totally stand by that. And I think in the process, they are all very separate jobs. Yes, you might be very capable of doing all of them. You might be a great arranger, a great composer, a great pianist, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be every job in your spectrum in one project. I think pick one, because that way your attention is focused on one bit 100%. Somebody else's attention is focused on another bit, and I think that way you've got more chance of having a successful production because you've not saturated your head with too much information.
That's amazing.
That's what I think anyway. And I know a lot of control freak musicians, composers who want to do everything, and if that works for them, it works for them. But for me personally, it doesn't work. And I love bouncing ideas off other people. I think that's part of the fun of it, is somebody giving you an idea and you going, oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's great. And I think that's how you grow as an artist. Otherwise, I mean, if I wasn't getting challenged by directors and friends and other arrangers and other composers, if I wasn't having these conversations, I would end up writing all my music and it would all sound the same. If I hadn't travelled loads, I wouldn't have ended up, I put quite a lot of Cuban rhythms into a lot of my music now. That would have never happened. So I think it's all about learning and growing and developing. And if you're just a self-contained unit, then isn't that a bit boring?
Definitely. That shows me a great link between language and music in terms of the primordial structure, where, I mean, in both those cases, it's all about collaboration and just creating different flavors and coming up with new things with the help of other people. That's exactly like language happened. So the last question, this one, I mean, two more, but the last one is like really philosophical. Do you think that film music should be categorized as a branch of classical music? I mean, except the classical pieces that are being used widely for film production.
No, I don't, because I think if it gets put into that category, it'll be really hard to break away. And I think film music and classical music do very different things. Classical music gets you to a point, it makes you feel something, it's got its own story within, and it's got like a lot of set structures with the way it's composed. I mean, obviously you can play and break around with them, but you tend to have a sort of set formula with a lot of old works. And I think the beauty of film music is everything's done by the second. There's no rhyme or reason for, with film music, the beauty of it is the story is not it. Obviously, the music is enhancing the story, but it's been composed but in a different way. It's been composed by the second. It's like 1 minute you could be in a field somewhere, and the next minute there's a flashback to a fight, and the music has to change to reflect that. So, as a piece, it evokes so much stuff, but the whole construction of it is really different. And I think in a lot of ways, it's very similar to classical music. I think the way it's orchestrated and the way and the different sounds you can use as well, like all this stuff with soundscaping is becoming really big, and technology is really having a play on film music.
Soundscaping?
And that's, yeah, so like you can add, I work with a sound designer, and we did a show a couple of years ago. We did Arabian Nights in London, and I wanted this wispy sound. I couldn't explain what I wanted, but he's a sound designer. He went to the seaside. He recorded sounds of like shells and water and added that on top, and
That's
it
amazing.
was perfect. It was just what I wanted. And I think classical music is so beautiful. It doesn't need any of that stuff. And I think film music, you've got the scape to add loads of stuff to it now, like all the soundscaping stuff. And people are doing it with classical music as well. But I think by keeping film its own kind of genre, it's allowing it to develop in a way that's different to classical music. And I think it should keep developing that way.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So the last question, as I promised, philosophical question for the end, and once again you can approach it however you want.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is music?
Oh gosh, okay.
Can be really briefly.
Melody.
Yeah,
because I think there's a lot of I've read a few the origins of music books. I've always been really interested in stuff like that. And people say we hear it all the time. We hear melodies all the time. People say it stems from bird song. That's where it came from, just hearing birds. I think it's melodies.
Amazing, great definition. I've also heard that the reason why music is so close to our hearts, and I think it ties with it, is that it literally came from our hearts, that we based it on the heart rhythm and the melody of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a nice thought as well.
So I think there's no better way to end it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It was super cool talking to you. Thanks for listening to this conversation with Sonum Batra. If you enjoyed this thing, subscribe on YouTube, review it with 5 stars in Apple Podcast, follow on Spotify, or connect with me on Twitter or Instagram at Dorabiala, spelled MattDorabiala. Thank you.